Cahoots Theatre's world premiere of HILOT Means Healer makes its world premiere this week in Toronto. And joining us now is the playwright, SiMalaya Alcampo. Welcome to What She Said.
Thank you very much.
Now, HILOT Means Healer is the story of an unlikely group of individuals caught in the crosshairs of colonial violence. Now, they have to depend on each other or risk becoming isolated in the devastation of war. So the story is drawn from traditional Philippine folklore, legends, and indigenous spirituality. So tell us a little bit more about what we're going to learn through the show.
So the play is set in the 1945 during the Battle of Manila. And during this time, it was during the 3-year occupation of Manila by the Japanese army. And there were Allied forces, the Americans, that had joined a Filipino army, as well as there was a rebel group of the Hukbalahap who were fighting to protect the people. And at this time, Manila was the second most bombed Allied city in World War II, second only to Warsaw, Poland. And there was devastation in the city, and trees were charred, buildings were burned, there were very little places of safety. And amid this environment, in the outskirts of the city, there's a garden, like a sanctuary oasis, that a woman named Flor has created for herself and also for her adopted daughter, Alma. Flor is a healer. She's a maghihilot, albularyo in the traditional Filipino sense of knowing how to work with herbs, knowing how to use healing touch to heal ailments. And Alma, her adopted daughter, is the complete opposite. She's a warrior. She loves to create weapons. And they have different ways of protecting themselves and each other through the devastation of war. And on the night of All Souls Day, Araw ng mga Patay, when the veil between the spirit world and the physical world is the thinnest, a stranger crosses over into the garden, Alfredo. And he threatens to unbalance everything that they've put into place.
Now, well, it sounds fascinating, but I spent some of my teenage years in Australia, and we learned more, I think, about Philippine history than because of Australia's connection there as well. Than people do here. So what inspired you to write this story? Is there something in your family background that goes?
Yes. So my parents survived the Japanese occupation as children. And the stories I heard growing up always fascinated for me. No matter how young I was, I still wanted to hear more. And I kept asking questions. And there was a limit to how much they wanted to share, because I think that that trauma still lingers, because it's not a history that's taught in the Philippines. And for me, as a person growing up here in the diaspora, wanting to connect to my culture, I think intergenerational trauma is real. So even though I did not experience the war, my generation feels the effects of it, being raised by people who experienced it and yet could not really fully express the impact of it. So I'm a hopeful person, and I also believe in this play that healing is also real, is possible intergenerationally, so that things that we heal and understand among ourselves can impact our ancestors. And also I think that as a settler and guest living on indigenous territories on Turtle Island, it's really important to value the stories of survivors of atrocities. For example, we just saw 150,000 residential school survivors. That some of the stories were released just yesterday, and they just proved to me that these conversations we're having around indigeneity, whether it's in the Philippines indigenous or indigenous people's stories of Turtle Island, they come because people have taken the risk to tell stories that expose soul wounds, that expose atrocities and history that oftentimes we don't want to look at. And when we tell those truths, then really that's the only path to reconciliation. We can't really have reconciliation without looking at those stories. So I feel like it's a privilege to be able to be talking about these things, and these conversations would not have happened without these these stories.
Well, can we delve just a little bit more into the intergenerational matter? Because can you give people who really don't understand an example of when it was that the light switch went on for you, that this may be something that's not solely my issue, it's come from beyond, as it were.
Yes. So I think that it has to do, like, these issues that happen within individual families may deal with, may come out in forms of disconnection, silence, repressed anger. And the impact on that, I think, as my generation as children who's raised by folks that went through that, it's this kind of feeling of loss of culture, a loss of connection, a loss of being able to communicate with your parents about parts of their lives that they're still kind of coping with.
Well, the cast and crew is made up of, about 30 people?
Yeah.
All of color, and it's directed by Jasmine Chen. And there's also live music.
There is. So Mary Carl Guyo is a multi-instrumentalist. All the instruments are going to be live. She plays a traditional gong instrument from the southern Philippines called the kulintang. And then she also plays gongs from the Obo-Manobo tribe in Mindanao in the Philippines that are hanging gongs from the Lumad peoples. And everything is represented by those gongs, by other hand instruments, as a connection to the elementals, to wind, water, air, and fire. And every night you will have a one-of-a-kind show because of the improvisations that Mary Carl will be doing. And the cast is a wonderful cast of 4 brilliant actors who are really, the process has been very collaborative. They've asked me questions as a playwright that I've never thought of before because of their gifts as artists. And also Jasmine is bringing in also a lot of movement and things that I couldn't express in the text, she's expressing without words.
Excellent. Now, you were born in Manila,
Yeah.
and you were raised in Toronto.
Yes.
And among other things, you've developed community arts projects with queer youth, survivors of the mental health system, and migrant domestic workers. So tell us not just what your message is, but what do you hope people take away from your play?
Mm-hmm. So I've really had the privilege of learning about my culture and really unlearning some of the things that I find aren't centered in my culture. So it's a decolonization process, basically.
How do you unlearn something?
So basically, for instance, I didn't know, I'm a psychology grad at U of T, and I didn't know there was a Filipino psychology. So there's a psychology that sees our values, our ways of being from within the culture as opposed to outside. For instance, to be mahiya, to be shy, to be kind of differential, is often seen as a negative thing, but it's actually from within a culture, it's seen from a decolonial perspective, a Filipino perspective, it's actually seen as a strength. It's about collectivity and being able to empathize and connect with other people in the group and put yourself kind of step back, and you decide how you step forward. So for me, those are the kind of things that I feel are very hopeful and are transformative. I'd love for people who are interested about Filipino spirituality and culture to see the beauty in it, to see the richness in it, and that there is a history that we're just beginning to learn and unlearn.
And unlearn.
Yes.
And unlearn, yeah. So what's next for you when this is done? Do you think this could be maybe made into something else, more of would you film this performance? Would this be something just to get it out there to more people? Would you like to travel with the
Sure,
show?
I'd love to travel with the show. I'm getting some interest in people want to create it into a graphic novel or some animated type of series. I'm totally open to that. There's also like a queer love story that happens. So I love that it's connected to that kind of trans identity in our Filipinx community that goes beyond the binary, because one of the features is we connect to the babaylan, which are the women priestesses, seers, leaders in the community that were equal, if not actually guiding the men in pre-colonial society. So I think there's a richness in that I think we'll really invite people in to learn more. Yeah.
Well, HILOT means healer runs October 9th to 27th at the Theater Center BMO Incubator. Now, that's at 1115 Queen Street West. You can find tickets at kahoot.ca/HILOT. That's HILOT. Joe, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you kindly. Thank you.